The US-Canada trade relationship, long considered one of the world's most stable and mutually beneficial, is now under significant strain. President Trump has fired a new salvo in the ongoing lumber wars by imposing hefty tariffs on Canadian softwood lumber, a move that has sent shockwaves through both economies. The administration claims these tariffs are designed to protect American producers, making Canadian wood more expensive, and, in theory, giving US lumber companies a much-needed competitive edge in their own market. This bold step is a cornerstone of Trump's America First agenda, but it's not without consequences. Industries on both sides of the border are feeling the impact, from sawmills in the Pacific Northwest to construction sites in Ontario and Quebec. For Canadian companies, who have long relied on access to the vast US market, the tariffs are seen as a deep betrayal by a trusted trading partner, threatening jobs and livelihoods across Canada's forestry sector. The new tariffs disrupt a historically stable trade partnership, replacing decades of negotiation and compromise with unilateral action and escalating tensions. By erecting this economic barrier, the US is directly challenging the principles of North American free trade, raising questions about the future of agreements like NAFTA and the USMCA. Canadian lumber is a crucial resource for the booming US housing market. Now, with higher prices, American builders and homebuyers alike are bracing for increased costs, delays, and uncertainty in an already volatile market. The stage is set for a major economic and political confrontation. Canada's leaders have vowed to retaliate, promising countermeasures that could escalate the dispute even further. As a result, deeply integrated supply chains are being forced to realign, with companies scrambling to adapt to the new reality and minimize disruptions. The US appears willing to risk straining its relationship with its northern neighbor in pursuit of domestic economic goals, setting the stage for a prolonged and uncertain chapter in the lumber wars. The White House views these tariffs as a crucial defense of American jobs, positioning them as a shield for workers and communities that rely on the lumber industry for their livelihoods. Administration officials argue that without such measures, domestic mills would struggle to compete, risking widespread job losses and economic decline in rural areas. The tariffs are intended to support the domestic lumber industry, which has faced mounting pressure from lower-priced imports. By imposing these duties, the government hopes to ensure that American mills remain competitive and can continue to provide stable employment for thousands of workers across the country. The administration claims Canadian producers benefit from unfair advantages, such as government policies that allow them to access timberlands at below-market rates. This, they argue, gives Canadian lumber companies a significant cost edge over their American counterparts. US producers argue that these practices amount to a government subsidy, making Canadian lumber artificially cheaper in the US market and putting American businesses at a disadvantage. The tariffs are designed to level the playing field, a move that has been widely applauded by US lumber companies and their employees. Many see this as a long overdue step to protect American industry from what they view as unfair foreign competition. For workers in small towns dependent on sawmills, these protections are seen as essential for preserving local economies and maintaining a way of life that has existed for generations. The administration frames this policy as a matter of national economic security, aiming to reduce dependency on foreign imports and encourage Americans to buy domestically produced lumber. However, critics argue that the tariffs amount to protectionism, benefiting a select group of companies while potentially raising costs for consumers and the broader economy. Many economists question the validity of the unfair subsidy claims, suggesting that the tariffs may be more about political gain than sound economic policy. They warn that such measures could spark retaliation and disrupt trade relationships. The debate continues in Congress and the media, centering on whether these tariffs are a legitimate response to unfair trade practices or simply a political handout to a powerful domestic industry. Ultimately, the tariffs are part of a broader America First vision, reflecting a policy shift that prioritizes domestic strength and self-sufficiency over global integration. The true motive behind the tariffs remains hotly contested, fueling an ongoing trade dispute between the US and Canada and leaving the future of the lumber industry and its workers uncertain. For Canada, the tariffs' impact is severe, threatening their primary US market. Canadian producers face an existential crisis with wiped-out profit margins. Provinces like British Columbia, reliant on forestry, are hit hardest. Communities built around timber face job losses and economic hardship. Sawmills are curtailing production, laying off workers, or closing. The tariffs force Canadian companies to seek new markets in Asia and Europe. Diversifying trade is slow and costly, unable to replace the U.S. market overnight. The Canadian government condemns the tariffs as unjust and protectionist. Legal challenges are being prepared, but the process is slow. Canadian producers must weather a storm threatening their survival. The tariffs highlight the vulnerability of Canada's U.S. market dependence. Tariffs, which are often introduced with the intention of protecting U.S. lumber mills and supporting domestic jobs, are having unintended consequences that ripple through the entire economy. While these policies aim to give American producers an edge, they end up hurting American consumers in ways that are often overlooked. When tariffs are imposed, the cost of imported lumber rises. These higher costs don't just stay with the mills, they're passed down the supply chain, affecting builders, contractors, and ultimately, home buyers. As a result, the price of building materials goes up, and so do the prices of new homes. For many Americans, the dream of owning a home is already a challenge. With these added costs, home ownership becomes even more expensive, pushing it further out of reach for young families and first-time buyers. The emotional toll is real, as families worry about whether they can afford a place to call their own. The National Association of Home Builders has raised alarms, warning that these tariffs act like a direct tax on home buyers. They argue that the policy, while well-intentioned, ends up making it harder for Americans to achieve the dream of home ownership. Rising lumber costs can add thousands, sometimes tens of thousands, of dollars to the price of a new home. This not only worsens the affordability crisis, but also slows down the pace of new construction as builders hesitate to take on projects with unpredictable costs. The impact doesn't stop there. The tariffs risk slowing the entire housing market, reducing the supply of new homes and making it even harder for buyers to find affordable options. It's not just new homes that are affected. Renovation projects also face higher costs, which means homeowners looking to improve or expand their living spaces, as well as the contractors they hire, are feeling the pinch. U.S. mills, despite the protection from tariffs, may not be able to meet the increased demand. This can lead to shortages, empty shelves at lumber yards, and frustrating delays at construction sites across the country. In the end, while the policy is designed to help one segment of the industry, it ends up harming others, creating economic distortions that ripple through the housing market and beyond. The big question remains: can U.S. production truly fill the gap left by reduced Canadian imports? Many experts are skeptical, pointing out that the supply chain is more complex than it seems. The result may be higher prices, more construction delays, and a housing market that's even tougher for everyday Americans. Ultimately, tariffs meant to protect can end up making the American dream harder to achieve for millions. The lumber dispute highlights the debate between protectionism and free trade. The Trump administration endorses protectionism, shielding industries from foreign competition. Proponents argue tariffs prevent unfair practices and protect American jobs. Free trade advocates say open markets lead to efficiency and prosperity. Tariffs may save some jobs but raise costs and reduce consumer power. The lumber tariff is a case study of this clash, with rising costs for U.S. construction. The government picks winners and losers, creating economic distortions. Protectionism can damage international relations and lead to trade wars. Free trade promotes cooperation and adherence to shared rules. The U.S. choice in this dispute sends a message about its global economic role. Canada responds to the tariffs with a multi-pronged counter-offensive. Ontario's premier launches a media campaign warning of U.S. repercussions. Provincial leaders threaten retaliatory measures against U.S. goods. Prime Minister Carney focuses on diplomacy and trade diversification. Canada seeks new markets in Europe and Asia to reduce U.S. dependence. The diplomatic push shows Canada won't be held hostage by protectionism. The response includes promoting new trade deals for economic resilience. Canada prepares legal challenges through international bodies. The strategy combines public pressure, diplomacy, and legal action. Canada signals it will defend its industries and uphold trade principles. The response aims to show the U.S. that Canada has other options. The lumber dispute illustrates shifting global alliances and economic self-reliance. Trump's unilateral approach contrasts with Carney's diplomatic strategy. Canada's quest for new markets is a long-term strategic pivot. The tariffs expose the vulnerability of reliance on a single trading partner. Canada's success in diversifying could alter long-standing trade flows. Protectionist measures may lead to higher trade barriers globally. Canada's strategy could reinforce the value of a rules-based trading system. The world watches to see if confrontation or cooperation will prevail. The lumber war underscores the value of adaptability and strong alliances. The future prosperity of both nations depends on navigating a changing world together.